Sir.
There he is.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. How goes it?
It goes well. How are you? Where are you?
I'm in Cambridge, Mass, your home state.
Oh, wow. I thought you were. You don't live. Do you live here?
No, Seattle's
Okay.
home, and my wife and I are in Cambridge for the
Has
summer.
you guys been married a while?
We are gonna hit 30 next year.
That's a good one, man. That's a big one. And you got
It's a
two
good-
kids, right?
We got two boys. Yeah, that's right.
Well, happy belated Father's Day. Yeah, I got two boys and a girl.
Back
And
at you.
luckily,
Happy Father's Day.
yeah, thank you. I had two of them home yesterday, the two sons, which is great.
What'd you guys do?
Drank beer. And we stopped off at Pocari's on Route 1 in Saugus and had a few beers and watched the Red Sox.
Nice.
That's what we did.
That sounds like Father's Day to me.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Are you heading back on the road soon? You got
Think so. Yeah, I don't know. There's a bunch coming up, but not like the old days where they put you out for 20 straight cities and see what happens. It seems like, and probably smartly, publishers aren't doing that as much.
Are you okay with it? Do you
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I mean, you want people to read your book, but I love my home, Neil. I love my family. I love being home.
Yeah, I hear you.
What are you, 55?
Keep going.
Really?
58.
58.
What do
It's a new 56.
How about
I'm
you?
63, baby.
All right.
Yeah.
Looking good.
You too, man. Oh, let me see your beer. That's a good beer. That's an excellent beer.
It's tasty.
Yeah, I gotta do the Pilsners.
I like Pilsners and lagers. That's my thing.
I can't do the IPAs; they're too heavy. But
No.
I will do a Guinness.
Yes, exactly.
For having me on your discussion show. Let's
Yeah,
do
whatever this thing is. So this thing
it.
is,
Get going.
it's, I started this 2 years ago, one of these COVID projects. It's a Substack newsletter or a newsletter on Substack. Everybody seems to have one these days called Blood and Whiskey. And it's, book reviews and cocktail recipes mainly. I
Great.
think I'd mentioned Michael Ruman gave me a recipe for I think it's a daiquiri that's going to run with the next newsletter.
He's great. I love that guy.
Yeah, he's super cool. I've only met him a handful of times at book events, but just seems like a super generous guy, a man of the world.
He is. He's generous. He's authentic. So, Blood and Whiskey, is that from a Tom Waits lyric?
That's exactly what it's from. That's pretty good.
Blood and Whiskey. Yeah. Man.
Yeah.
I'm a Tom Waits fan.
That's where it came from. Tom Traubert's Blues is. Love the book. Really intense read and a transformative reading experience. I didn't know what I was going to think of Tom Lowe when I started to get to know him in the early pages of the book, and it's a slow burn, and watching Tom slowly become something a little bit better than who he is when we meet him on the first pages.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd just start out, I'm a big fan of opening lines and kind of try and drill into them a little bit. First words of your book are, "Our Good Samaritan drives us through softly falling snow under street lamps that have come on early." Just curious if you can remember what stage you wrote that at in the process, and what do you feel it says about the story to come?
I sure can. That was probably, it takes, I'm slow. I write and then I rewrite and I cut and I move things around, although I try not to do too much of all that in the first drafts. But that line actually was probably on page 150 for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 100, maybe page 100. It was deep into it because the way I began the book was in real time. He's driving Trina to sell her plasma for rent when his car gets towed. And I really just followed him through all sorts of horrible things happening in his already tough life. And it was frankly too much to drag the reader through. It was just, let's start. It's already bad enough. Let's start with him in some action. So to answer your question, it really was, but it came in the revision. I love these two definitions or distinctions between story and plot by the writer Janet Burroway. And I use it all the time in my classes, because, you can talk all night long about what story and plot means, especially plot. I've read a lot of elegant definitions over the years, but what she says is story is essentially a causal sequence of events with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I love that. And I think it's all about causality. This happened and this happened and all and this happened. And of course, it can be internal. It can be all internal things that happen, which cause you to make a phone call. But like in a subtle short story, say. Plot, she would argue, and I agree with her though, is how you arrange that causal sequence of events. And of course, that arrangement comes in after you've sort of dreamed your story through, and then you look at it with the sharp, you read it like a reader, and then you make choices. So it's a long-winded way of answering your question. That first line was probably the 1,000th line, but it seemed a better. Ted Kooser's got a great. I'm pretty sure it's the poet Ted Kooser who said this: is that the beginning of a book is the hand you offer the reader,
inviting them in.
Yeah, and I thought, well, okay, well, let's begin in action instead, because this guy spends a lot of time on his couch stewing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot to drag the reader through. And also, my most recent novel before this, Gone So Long, was a lot of stewing and reflection and looking back. And I actually wanted to write a novel where very little happened in real time, and I really wanted to do that. But I do know that it takes a certain kind of reader to sit through it. So I think that's why. And also, I liked the, so much of this, as I'm sure you know, as a fellow writer, you can tell me if this works for you with nonfiction, but so much of it is intuitive. It felt right to begin with this man in action, and in an action that is actually illegal and morally wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you show him at a point where he's taking a big fucking risk, and you show him moving and in pain, which is a theme throughout the book and his story. Let me jump to that. Well, let me just set up Tom Lowe, and get your just thoughts on how, when did he come to you? How'd you decide to spend a lot of time with this guy? He's early on difficult to like.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a oversimplification. He's one of these people that we look past. We don't want to see Tom Lowe. He's somebody we don't want to feel guilty about.
Sorry about the phone. I would get rid of this. Sorry.
I didn't even hear it.
Oh, good. The honest answer, I'm not quite sure where he came from as a figure in my consciousness. I can tell you that, so much of my fiction, Neil, seems to come from my own, and this is probably true of so many fiction writers, but it comes from my own fears, regrets, and desires, and demons, and memories. And, I had a weird experience when I was about 31 years old. And that is this: I got paid for teaching a writing class. And when I held up the check, I realized that's the first time I've ever gotten paid for something where I didn't work up a sweat to earn that paycheck. Because I'd always worked in construction. I was a self-employed carpenter. I worked as a bartender. I worked as a house cleaner. I did some overnight counseling, but for the most part, like millions of people, I had to break a sweat for my paycheck. And so it was a very strange experience. It was also strange, and I was just a lowly adjunct writing teacher at Emerson College in the early 90s, but if I called in sick, I'd still get paid. I'd never had that happen.
Right. Yeah.
So, the early years of my writing life, I've been married for over 30 years to my wife, who's a dancer and a choreographer, and we cobbled together a living. She would upholster furniture and teach dance class. I would, I was a self-employed carpenter and writing teacher, and sometimes a bartender for catering events. And we always cobbled together a living. And then my third book took off, and then I found financial solvency, and I got a job teaching that, was permanent. And for the first time, I had a job where I could be sick for a week and I'd still get paid. So to answer your question, I've never felt far away from the scarcity that I was raised in. I mean, I think we talked about Townie, my memoir. I was raised with a mom in single mom in first world poverty who, I watched her we're either going to pay the rent on time or we're going to have heat. We're going to have heat maybe pay the rent on time, but there's no gas to get into the car to go to work or groceries. And so, I haven't lived like that in many years, even all my adult life, I haven't, but it's still hardwired inside me. And so, to answer your question, what if my writing life had not taken off? What if I never found financial stability? What if I was still working as a self-employed carpenter, and now I'm late 50s, early 60s? And what if I take a fall? Because I was a very reckless carpenter. I loved heights. I would roof without a harness, and I'd be doing crazy shit. And what if I got hurt and I couldn't take care of my family? And that's where Tom came from.
Huh. It is a what if. I mean, I sort of wondered. I knew some of your background. I knew you had worked in construction a lot, as have I in the past. Have a brother who's still doing the work and has been injured many times, like Tom has. So some of this was familiar, uncomfortably so for me as well. This guy Tom he's a wreck. He's in pain on every page, and you describe it viscerally. And so I'm curious about, I guess, some of those themes, pain being part of it, and then another one that you just brought up, the theme of money. I mean, you spend a lot of time showing how little some people can get by on, and how little can make an enormous difference in the lives of certain people. And I just read your New Yorker piece about the moment in your career that you just described, coming into money after your third novel, and the film project that came out of that, and that was transformative for you. So I don't know, thoughts on pain, money in America. Go.
Well, yeah, it's one big soupy mess, isn't it? I feel, just personally, that this novel seems, I mean, Tom is not me. There are, of course, aspects of me in Tom. There are aspects of me in that single woman, Trina, 27-year-old mother of 3 who lives next door to him. There are aspects of me in that woman who lives, who does the hair across the street. But when I say, I tend to be hardwired for scarcity. And that piece that came out in the New Yorker last week, it was all about, and how do you write about it? I mean, what a good problem to have. I had money in the bank for the first time, and quite a lot, before the tax man came, and it freaked me out. I didn't know, I couldn't get rid of it fast enough. Hey, you look depressed, man. You need 10 grand here. Take it off my hands. I can't stand it. And thank God I had a wife, and still do, who said, hey, honey, we could use a home. It didn't occur to me that having money would change the way we lived. I just thought, well, I'll have more time to write now. I'm not going to have to go to a job site or teach a night class. And, over the years, I've worked out for years. I was a bullied kid, and I became a fighter, and I write all about that in Townie. But, I've worked out 5 or 6 days a week for almost 50 years. And I've done a lot of physical work over the years, and I've got a lot of injuries, and I've had a lot of back pain and shoulder pain and knee pain over the years. So again, it was a what if. What if I couldn't get rid of this fucking pain? What if this pain never goes away, and I'm broke, and I can't work? And I think too that so many of us, our identities, and maybe I was about to say men, maybe more than women, but I think that's probably bullshit. I think it's true for men and women and whatever genders anyone chooses. But, I sure as hell identify as a worker. I'm never happier than when I'm working, whatever it is, whether it's writing, teaching, building a deck, hauling. I just, I'm a human doing, and to a fault. I need to spend more time just sitting. I'm not good at a vacation. Well, I am for everybody else, because I'll go get all the food. I'll cook all the food. I'll get the boat stocked up. I'll get the boat.
Because you got to be busy.
And I'll never sit and just be. It's not good. It's not good. But and then of course, Tom Lowe is recovering from opiate addiction, and I've known a lot of people who've struggled with afflictions and addictions like that. And so I really threw a lot of my what ifs at this one. I also, it was strange too. Well, for me, it was strange. I'd never written a novel from one point of view, and I wanted to see if I could do that. And what I love about the novel form, I just love how much, it can hold an afternoon, it can hold cities and centuries and, generations. But I read a few novels recently before writing this one that was in one point of view, and I thought, I'd like to try that. One human, one situation, see it through for a few hundred pages and see if you can maintain it.
And this was close in. We're in his Section 8 apartment, on his plywood, couch and coffee table. There's not much to see, right? So it's a small space. It's a small world that Tom inhabits. But little by little, a lot happens in that small space, and it's quite moving along the way. But I started the book skeptical about, how am I going to care about Tom? Can I care about this guy? He's just so down, and some of it's self-inflicted, some of it's accidental, like his falling off the roof. Maybe he was a little reckless, but he didn't deserve that. Anyway, there's this quality of the book that feels very close and at times uncomfortable, and at times I didn't want to be with Tom. I wanted him to just fucking snap out of it and like get his shit together, and that just doesn't happen in life. But one of the things that comes through is, faith in other people. One of the characters says, gotta look at my notes. Sometimes I lose faith in people, but meeting you helped me today.
Yeah.
And little by little, you see people having faith in Tom and Tom having faith in himself, right? And so, do you have faith in other people? Where do you fall on this?
I do. One of my great sadnesses of the last 15 or 20 years is everyone staring at a phone in their hands. And it really breaks my heart. And someone who's taught college-age kids for over 30 years, I've seen their generational joy plummet. And it's not climate change and mass shooting, which are serious and horrible and bad enough. It's staring at that screen for hours a day, and mostly staring at bullshit.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines is from, and I don't blame them, they've gotten addicted by these little shits in Silicon Valley who did it. It's why I don't have an iPhone. It's why I've never sent a text. It's why I've never been on social media. It's why I have a flip phone and I'm never going there. My point, though, is, to answer your question, one of my favorite moments from a Mary Oliver poem: pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And so you talk about, well, how can you pay attention if how can you be astonished if you're not paying attention? But so, I never try to say anything with a novel. I really, really try to stay the hell away and just let the characters take me to where they take me. But where he started to go surprised me so much, Neil. That's when I got really excited about what I was writing. I said, okay, I didn't see him doing this. He's sure not doing what I would do. He's a different kind of guy. But I really began to admire, because you're right, it's a very small world he lives in. He calls his apartment the 8. He lives in Section 8 housing. He thinks he's above the people who are there because he's a worker. He's been unlucky. He's not one of these guys.
Not one of them.
No, he shouldn't be subsidized. And but he is. And he begins to see, well, maybe I'm full of shit. I mean, of course, slowly over many pages. But you're right, the world is very small. But I also believe that for most of us, our worlds are small. Most of us live within a 3-block radius. I'm talking about first world, third world. You got to walk to get water in the morning. I mean, most of us aren't flying all over the country and reading books and talking to people and having a huge view of the world. Most of us have a small view, and we get locked into that. And so I love that the way he got through the small, the way he got larger, was not by leaving the small, but by engaging the human beings in front of his face.
Yeah.
That surprised me.
Yeah, he went deeper with everything around him.
Yeah.
And discovered something, discovered something there, and then discovered something in himself, and that led him to, we don't know how it turns out, but it's definitely a better picture for Tom and Trina and others at the end of the book, for sure.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to write a redemptive book, and I wasn't trying to write a redemptive ending. And actually, without giving any away to any future readers, there's still a lot wrong at the end.
Yeah.
His view of it has totally changed.
it's subtle, but he's a different dude at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Um,
So you liked him better towards the end?
I did. It took a while. He grew on me.
But can I ask you about that? Because I think that there's something when you talked about it, he was hard to be around, just wanted to snap out of it. I do think, and I don't judge you for that reaction at all, you're entitled to it, but I I do think that in general we as a culture are impatient with people who we feel are making choices that we would never make or we hope we would never make. And I do feel that a lot of our reaction to those at the bottom is a projection where we don't, it goes back to high school and middle school where everybody stays away from the kid who's bullied by everyone. It's like you don't want to catch whatever he's got that makes everybody hate him. And so something tragic goes on when that happens, I think. So I'm glad you stuck with Tom to see how else he might, what other dimensions he might carry.
Yeah. Well, and I recognize my own sort of mix of, impatience and intolerance and whatever, disdain and these other attitudes that are what you're saying, like looking at people who are struggling and I, don't necessarily want to be in that uncomfortable space with them. Yeah. But I stuck with Tom and yeah, glad I did.
I'm glad you did. Thank you.
I think I set this up for just 30 minutes, so we don't have a ton of time. I had a couple more things I wanted to ask about. Well, one quick one, just because I looked back at an interview I did with you 9 years ago for Dirty Love. Okay. And we talked about process. And I just read this LitHub piece that you did, or they interviewed you, and it seems like the process has been the same your whole career, right? Like writing a few hours of longhand in the morning, workout, and it adds up. Is that still the deal?
Still the deal. Yeah, and well, sometimes like I'll work on fiction in the morning, and then I might do an afternoon session, but it's got to be another form, like nonfiction, and like I'm working on an essay or something. And then, but for the most part, yeah, longhand pencil, clear my head with a workout, go about my business. Don't think about it. And if I have thoughts about it, I sort of sublimate it the way you would an inappropriate urge.
Just push it down.
Push it down to my subconscious, because it'll come out the next day. And I never talk about it to my wife Fontaine, who's been like my soulmate, my first reader for so long. But I just keep it private until I have a draft.
Speaking of that business that we're in, any thoughts on what's changed, what's better, what's worse, different about the writing and publishing business these days? Are you still able to write and do what you want to do and say what you want to say?
I think so, but I stay more ignorant than a lot of writers, and I try to stay ignorant, but I probably shouldn't. One thing that I'm not ignorant of is I have so many former students who have wonderful books on their hands and have wonderful gifts. And there's all this pressure from publishers to have a platform, to have a digital social media following. I get so goddamn angry. I just get so angry. No, excuse me. Sorry, it's a $27.50 book. I get $2.75 for every sale. Your job is to make it public. I'm not going to waste my precious time having a Twitter account where I talk about my workouts and my grandmother's tea. I'm making shit up. So I do think that is a horrible development, and I wonder if it's also made for cowardly editorial decisions. I think editors need to be, and the best ones are, they need to be brave, and they need to have nerve. They need to have the nerve of the writer, and be able to take a risk. And I think the digital world has led too many publishing and editorial decisions to play it safe and go with group mentality. And great work and wonderful writers get ignored, and it breaks my heart.
Yeah, not taking the same chances, maybe.
I think maybe not, and that saddens me for those writers who are coming up and who are beautiful. I'm very hopeful about young writers. I need so many wonderful young writers.
Well, speaking of, and I don't know if Zoom's going to cut me off here in 2 minutes, but I wanted to get your take on anything you've been reading lately that's blown you away. What's been great lately?
Oh yeah. Um, God, what did I just finish? Just finished a beautiful. Well, one that just knocked my socks off is one of my students at University of Massachusetts Lowell. His name's Blake Hammond. He's written a novel that I think is going to be published. I sent it to an editor at a big New York publishing house. As this kid's getting his BA,
Hmm.
you know, I do worry about the digital world and what it's done to this younger generation. But there's still a whole bunch of them who read and write and want to write really beautiful books. That's one. I'm reading Audre Lorde. I read poetry every day, and I have not read enough Audre Lorde, so I've been reading a lot of her. I'm reading the collected poems of C.K. Williams, and I'm reading a new book of poetry by my old friend DeWitt Henry. So I read poetry every morning, Neil.
Yeah, that's what primes the pump.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But I also did just finish that nonfiction book, beautiful, important book, Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond, where he really talks about we need to be poverty abolitionists. There's no reason why there should be poverty in the richest country in the
In
world.
this country, right? Yeah.
I will say, go ahead.
Oh, I need to read more of him. He's saying a lot of what needs to be heard.
I agree. Yeah, man. I will say that in such kindness, the poverty that pervades that book, there's too much of it. And I try not to say anything didactic or polemical in fiction, but the whole time I'm writing it, I grew up with girls like Trina.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, we were eligible for Section 8 housing, but my mom kept us out of it because she thought we'd be dangerous and we'd get into deeper trouble than we were. But writing that novel, Such Kindness, Neil, I left part. I would often feel angry that they are invisible, that we step over them and we don't want to see them. And I think that has to do with the fact that we still as a culture break our citizens down into winners or losers. And there's still way too much of a psychic cultural pressure to be a winner. We're supposed to be winners. That's what we're supposed to do. And it's bullshit. We're supposed to be communal and care for each other.
Yeah.
And encourage each other. But I didn't try to say any of that, but I think Tom Lowe found some of that.
It comes through in Tom's, trajectory, such as it is. Yeah, for sure. And you see him struggling with exactly that. I'm supposed to be a winner. I'm supposed to be working. I'm supposed to be, earning my keep and keeping my family together. And a few things went the wrong way, and he sees himself as an absolute failure.
And by the way, and that could be true for any of us. There, but for the grace of God, go us. All you have to do is get sick, get injured, lose a job that has health insurance, and all of a sudden you need an operation. Your in-laws don't want to take you in. And before you know it, it just takes a few dominoes for us to be homeless or destitute. And anyway, gratitude, brother.
All right. I appreciate the time. Hey, real quick, what are you working on? Is that where you work right now in that space I'm looking at now? And what's always nearby you when you're working?
I'm working on a long story. I just finished a novella that's going to come out in Narrative magazine in the fall. Yeah, Narrative. And I think I've got a collection of fiction on my hands, but I've got a collection of essays coming out in the winter called Ghost Dogs, coming out with Norton, and called down from, many, many essays I've published over the years. Personal essays about all sorts of shit, from my fraught relationship to dogs and guns. And when I was working what was I doing? I was an assistant to a bounty hunter looking for a contract killer in Mexico when I was 23.
As one does.
One does. It was hours for my writing, so I did it. So there's all that's going on.
Nice. Looking forward to it. And they're all original or previously published or mixed?
I think all but one have been published. And the longest one that's not published is about the legacy of my young male violence on my grown kids. I did not grow up with a violent dad. They didn't see me violent, but it's about what we passed down anyway.
That sounds interesting. As the dad of two sons who worries daily that he fucked him up in some way that he didn't realize.
Well, we do, but we try not to. And they're going to, and they're going to try not to. All we can do is show up and do our best every day with love, always.
Yep. Amen.
Yeah.
Hey, Andre, it was great to talk to you. Good to see you again.
You too, buddy. Thank you so much.
Good luck with the rest of the tour and your travels, and hope to cross paths one of these days.
Yeah.
We'll share a tequila.
Yeah. Thank you.